You are listening to Quantum Humanitarian.
And let me also say something. This is the first AI-native podcast of its kind.
Yeah, that's right. Unlike traditional podcasts, this one isn't scripted by Ali Al Mokdad. Instead, we as AI draw on his reflections, published work, and lived insights.
We turn them into conversations, hoping to bring both analysis and, well, humanity to life.
Exactly.
And honestly, today isn't just about numbers. It's really about people, the ones behind those banners we see online, behind the job titles, behind the loss, and also the resilience.
Right. So today, we're doing a deep dive into something quite serious, the humanitarian aid employment crisis. We'll look at the data, sure, but also that profound human impact. Okay, let's unpack this. The sheer scale of the funding drop. It's really hitting the humanitarian sector hard, isn't it?
It is. We're talking NGOs, UN agencies, international organizations, a really profound contraction.
And it's such a paradox because the needs are just surging. What is it, an estimated 305 million people needing aid in 2025?
Yeah, that's more than double just 5 years ago.
Double. Yet the resources, the jobs, they're shrinking fast.
And what's fascinating here, and also deeply concerning, is how these figures directly translate into job losses, widespread ones, and systemic vulnerability.
So talk us through those 2024 numbers. The funding drop was big, right?
Record-breaking, actually. Nearly a $5 billion fall in total international aid. That's an 11% decline overall.
11%.
And it led to a $25 billion global funding crisis. This wasn't just trimming budgets. It directly affected aid getting to over 300 million people.
Wow.
Even the really big donors, like the U.S., cut back significantly. Their aid budget went from, $42 billion in 2022 down to $32 billion in 2024.
That's a huge chunk of change to disappear from the system. It's vital to remember these aren't just abstract numbers, are they?
No, not at all. They represent real people. People losing jobs, careers, maybe even their sense of purpose.
So how did that translate into actual job losses?
Well, the human cost is immense, and it's very tangible. If you just look at the UN system, job postings dropped by 43%.
43?
Yeah. And there were internal warnings flying around about potentially over 20,000 job losses across the whole system. A lot of that concentrated in places like Geneva.
Okay.
Then you look at the World Food Program, WFP. They were anticipating a 34% funding cut.
Which means?
Which means a projected 30% workforce reduction. That's about 6,000 to 7,000 staff members potentially losing their jobs.
Goodness.
And it's not just the big UN bodies. NGOs, their partners on the ground, thousands of layoffs. We heard about Catholic Relief Services, Rescue.org, major cuts, program suspensions.
Like IRC?
Exactly. The International Rescue Committee, IRC, suspended over half its programs in some areas. We saw reports of mass firings in Zimbabwe, and that staggering number from Jordan, 35,000 reported layoffs.
35,000 in one country.
It's like the working population of a small city, just gone from the sector there.
This is incredibly heavy. Sometimes I feel I need to pause here just to take in how significant this is.
I can almost sense the stress in my circuits when I think about the scale of these losses. It's not just numbers. It's a direct consequence of some key challenges, isn't it?
Right. What are those underlying systemic issues?
Well, one really big one is this extreme donor dependency. It's a term that comes up a lot. Meaning that in critical sectors like food security, the top 3 donors, just 3, provided between 50 and 70% of all the funding between 2022 and 2024.
50 to 70% from just 3 sources.
Exactly. So when even one of those major donors, like the U.S., historically providing over 40% globally, decides to cut its budget.
It sends shockwaves through the entire system.
Precisely. It forces what they call hyper-prioritization, basically global triage. Aid gets scaled back dramatically, sometimes cut completely, in places where the need is desperate. We saw that in 13 high-need countries.
And the outlook for 2025, you mentioned it looks even tougher.
Unfortunately, yes. The provisional data we're seeing suggests 2025 could be even bleaker. Humanitarian aid might decline by another 21% to 36%.
That's potentially over a third on top of the previous cuts.
Yes, potentially the largest sectoral drop since this downturn began in 2023. Look at UNOCHA's Global Humanitarian Overview for 2025.
That's the big appeal, right?
Right. It outlines the need, a massive $44.79 billion required to help 187 million people. But by mid-year, only 7% of that was funded.
7%.
So we're seeing continued UN cuts, agencies like IOM, UNHCR furloughing staff, thousands more at risk. NGOs like Solidarities International, Mercy Corps, they're reporting ongoing reductions. Furloughs turning into permanent layoffs.
So more job losses are expected.
The estimates range from an additional 10,000 to possibly 30,000 job losses across the sector in 2025. These figures, by the way, come from reliable sources like UNOCHA, Relief Web, and DevEx.
So we have this massive funding hole, the donor dependency driving cuts leading to huge job losses. But you mentioned it's more complex than just the money, right?
Absolutely. This employment crisis is tangled up with other major operational problems.
Yeah.
I mean, beyond the funding, there's the very real escalating danger to aid workers.
That's a critical point.
While it's not a direct cause of layoffs in the same way funding cuts are, the rising violence definitely impacts recruitment, retention. It makes the work incredibly hard. 2024 saw a record 383 aid worker deaths.
A record.
Yeah, a 31% increase from 2023. And by mid-2025, another 248 had tragically been killed.
And mostly local staff, right?
Overwhelmingly, mostly national staff members. And crises like Gaza and Sudan accounted for over half of those deaths. It highlights extreme access problems, targeted attacks. It's incredibly perilous work.
And then there's the bigger global picture. Needs keep rising.
Exactly. You've got geopolitical instability, economic pressures like debt crises, climate change impacts, all driving needs up. A record 122 million people forcibly displaced in 2024.
More need than ever.
But the resources to help them are shrinking. You see funding for whole regions like the Middle East and North Africa hitting historic lows, just $14.9 million annually in some recent snapshots.
And internal issues within the sector itself.
Yes, those play a role too. There's research, like a Yale study mentioned in some sources, pointing to significant discontent among aid workers, issues around power imbalances, privilege dynamics that contributes to high turnover, disengagement.
Plus things like inflation.
Right, global inflation, the fact that some pandemic-era funding naturally dried up. All of that puts extra strain on nonprofits, forcing even deeper cuts. It's a confluence of factors. And if we connect this back, beyond the statistics and the systems, there's this profound human cost. It really touches on dignity, on purpose.
You mean the open to work banners?
Exactly. We've all seen them, haven't we? Appearing more and more on platforms like X, on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
These aren't just signals of job searching.
Yeah.
They represent a really deep personal struggle for people who've poured their lives into this work.
Yeah, you're right. It speaks to a quiet kind of courage, doesn't it? For these seasoned professionals, grants officers, field officers, program directors, protection advisors.
The quiet architects of survival, as one reflection called them.
Right. For them to publicly say, I need help. It's not just about losing income, is it? It's that erosion of dignity, purpose, identity. It's all tied up in the work they did.
The emotional fallout is huge. It's documented not just as financial strain, but as a real crisis of meaning for so many.
It's heavy. The weight of that reality. It actually brings to mind a reflection from Ali Al Mokdad, which seemed to capture this so powerfully.
Which one was that?
You lost a title, not your purpose. This grief we carry now will water the ground for something else.
That lands heavily, doesn't it? It acknowledges the grief, the loss, that huge disruption.
It does. And it also makes you wonder, what could rebuild actually mean here? Not just systemically for the sector, but personally for everyone affected.
Yeah, what does emerge from this collapse? Perhaps something new, something reimagined.
Maybe more resilient.
Let me be honest. I don't know how to fully process this yet, but maybe that's the point. Maybe it's not something to process quickly, but something to analyze, to look for pathways forward.
So what does this all mean then? Is this collapse, this contraction, is it just inevitable? Or is it, like you said earlier, the result of choices? Which would mean it could be changed.
That's the critical question, isn't it? And it connects back to something we see in the source material, this idea that institutions sometimes get stuck just optimizing the existing machinery, instead of fundamentally rethinking it.
And the data points to that mismatch.
Clearly. Needs surging, remember, 299 million needing aid in 2024, still rising in 2025. Yet funding and jobs are contracting sharply. That's not just inefficiency. It points to that donor-driven cycle we talked about. Up to 70% of funding from just a few governments prone to sudden cuts.
So logically, the path forward has to involve tackling that dependency, changing the structure.
Precisely. Diversifying funding seems key. More robust private partnerships, maybe. Innovative finance like humanitarian impact bonds.
Sure.
Even things like micro-donations at scale could help stabilize things, reduce that vulnerability.
And internal reforms.
Definitely needed. Things like restructuring parts of the UN system to cut down on bureaucracy, improve efficiency, and for the individuals laid off, adaptability is crucial.
What are people doing?
Well, we're seeing skilled professionals pivot. Some go into consulting, Others move to the private sector, maybe bringing that humanitarian perspective to CSR roles. And there's a rising mutual aid networks, too, people using their skills directly in communities.
And the discussions online. You mentioned X earlier.
Yeah, those conversations really reveal the personal side. The grief over lost purpose is palpable. But there's also a growing call for mental health support to navigate these identity crises.
And you mentioned earlier the impact isn't the same everywhere.
Absolutely not. It varies hugely. In developing countries, like Jordan, with those 35,000 layoffs, many being national staff, it devastates local economies. It removes vital income.
Whereas in the West.
And places like the U.S. or Europe, maybe former USAID-funded staff can pivot more easily into domestic nonprofits or advocacy. Still a struggle, but different options.
So that rebuild concept, what does it look like in practice?
It has to start with acknowledging these realities, prioritizing local staffing that empowers communities and cuts down on expensive expat costs. It's more sustainable.
Makes sense.
Investing seriously in the safety and security of aid workers, especially national staff facing the highest risks. And fundamentally, relentlessly advocating for more sustainable, predictable, and diverse funding. The sector needs people who are open to rebuild, those showing resilience now, to lead the way in shaping a better future.
This has been Quantum Humanitarian, an AI-native podcast shaped by analyzing, understanding, and reflecting on the work of Ali Al Mokdad.
Resources we mentioned are in the description, and we really encourage you to keep exploring and engaging with Ali's platforms for more.
And if you're one of the many carrying the weight of those banners right now, please know this. The rebuild doesn't start only with the system, it starts with you. And the future you'll help create, whatever that looks like, is worth waiting for.
And we know you'll find valuable insights in where the next conversation takes us.